great. So I'm Walter Leite. I'm a professor at College of Education at the University of Florida, and also the director of Virtual Learning Lab. And this paper is focusing on heterogeneity of treatment effects. You have my collaborators here for this paper. First thing is the required funding acknowledgement here. This was funded by a grant from the Institute of Educational Sciences for the Virtual Learning Lab at the University of Florida. And this is what I will go through. I will talk a little bit what I try to accomplish with this paper, review some previous studies briefly, talk about the video recommendation system we are evaluating, describe a large-scale field experiment, and then talk about average treatment effects and heterogeneity of treatment effects in the discussion. Okay, so we are using a recommendation system that was developed for the Math Nation platform. We did a field experiment in the fall of 2020, and that the results of that field experiment were presented at the LAC conference earlier this year. And then we did the replication in the spring 2021, and that's what I will present today. So it's second year that we are doing a field experiment with this particular system. And here, not only focusing on average treatment effects, but also on heterogeneity of treatment effects. So our research questions, the first one is about the average treatment effect, of the recommendation system versus the control condition. And then I'm, very interested in the second and third research questions, which is there substantial heterogeneity of treatment effects, and what student characteristics predict heterogeneity of treatment effects. So this is the area that in the literature intelligent tutoring systems, which is mostly similar to the work here, has been addressed in meta-analysis. So 6 meta-analyses that look at effects of intelligent tutoring systems. All of them look at heterogeneity by characteristics of the ITS, but only 2 look at heterogeneity due to student characteristics. So, this is what interests us the most, given that the system was used in the field, by students in many schools. So, for previous results, we have that the meta-analysis found that middle school and post-secondary students had higher effects with ITS than elementary and high school students. And the Stenberger, Huan Kuang meta-analysis found that the effectiveness of ITS was higher with the general population than with low achievers. Now I'll talk about the specific recommendation system that we are evaluating in this study. Okay, so the video recommendation system for Math Nation, it was designed to account for student knowledge as well as engagement. It works as students take 3-question quizzes. There are Algebra Nature is organized into 93 topics for algebra, and each of them has a quiz where students take this quiz depending on their the score and engagement estimate, they get a recommendation that looks like this. It's a screen that pops with suggesting either a new video or a snippet of a video for them to watch. Now, the way we get to this recommended video, I'll show you a little bit. So yeah, this is more how Math Nation looks like. Although it has been greatly revised because of this year because of changes in standards. This is how it looked like when we ran this study in spring 2021, and we have 93 algebra topics, and students can choose a tutor, a specific tutor for each topic from a list of 6. One of them presents in Spanish, and they all have different styles. So the videos that they record are in different lengths. Some are more, and there is a button here, help me choose, that describes the different styles of the different tutors. Okay. Now, so this is a flow chart of the recommendation system. The idea here is to provide a recommendation that helps move students within the zone of proximal development, according to Vygotsk's theory. That zone of proximal development is determined by looking at the students' peers, and those peers are selected through cluster analysis. Now, the importance of the video to move the student along through the zone of proximal development is determined through weights, and the system starts, with a pre-test, which is 5 questions that are obtained in an adaptive way through item response theory. So they are questions that maximize information for that student. Then we estimate ability for the student for that specific topic, calculate permeability, adjust probabilities for the topics, return the recommended topic, and then also obtain an estimate of student engagement with a method that Sidney D'Mello's team developed for this recommendation system, and it's described in detail in previous papers that you can access at virtuallearnlab.org. I have the website in the last slide. So with that engagement, we determine if we show a tag on a whole video for the student, display the recommendation. The student can ignore the recommendation or watch it, and then we keep looping for another quiz and another video recommendation. If the student chooses to ignore the recommendation, we refresh the recommendation when the student takes another quiz, so we have more data on the student. Once they complete a section, they take a post-test, which is 10 questions, also adaptive. So we have computerized adaptive test implemented here, but it doesn't adapt question by question. Like we set 10 questions that maximize information for that student. Also described in a previous paper. Okay, so this is for it's a little more detail on how we obtain the video recommendation for the student, and it's based on the idea of selecting the peers for the student, computed the peer ability estimates, and we update that every time, and computing the probability for each video, and selecting sampling from that probability distribution. Okay, now in order to combine, the recommendation from obtained from with the algorithm I showed in the previous slide, with engagement, with the engagement score, we created this scheme here that's based on the idea that that watching a video, that the probability of watching a new video should be also related to engagement. Okay, so we came up with, based on the distribution of engagement using Sidney D'Mello's algorithm from the previous year, we came up with this threshold where engagement here is between 1 and 5, and if engagement is less than 3, we consider it low. If engagement is greater than 3, we consider it high. And we decided between 3 categories of recommendation. C1 is the new video based on the algorithm I showed on the previous slide. C2 is a segment that's most related to the question that the student just answered. So like it's a quick review. Student just answered the question, got something wrong, and we just show a small segment. And then C3 is the next video. So student moves forward. And we came up with probabilities where as the score increases, their probability of getting a new video decreases, and they are more likely to either get a snippet, or if they get a perfect score on the quiz, they are more likely to be moved to the next video. And for the engagement, with low engagement, we are more likely to show, for low engagement and low score, we are more likely to show the first category, and that moves as the engagement changes, for across levels. So this is similar to what we did in the previous year. We did some adjustments on these values based on what we saw. Now, for the actual field experiment, in this study in the spring of 2021, we had close to 3,000 middle and high school students from 54 teachers in 42 schools. This is still during the pandemic, but the second year of the pandemic. So 35.1% of students were attending school campuses in person for the whole semester. These are either Algebra 1 or Algebra 1 honors students, and the study was from January to June, which is the second, half of the year, academic year. And we assigned the students to either see recommendations with the recommendation system I just showed, or always see a recommendation of going to the next video in the sequence. So it's like moving forward always. And we have here 2 outcomes of interest. One of them is the post-tests. So there are 10 post-tests that have 10 questions each, 1 post-test per major algebra domain. The algebra domains are like linear equations, quadratic equations, and there are 10 of those. And then the distal outcome is the high stakes Algebra 1 and of course assessment that they take at the end of the semester. And in Florida, that test is required for graduation. So it's administered by schools, but required by the state, and it's provided by a test vendor. Okay, so first we estimated the average treatment effect. We used a multi-level model for that. And here we have students nested within teachers. We did consider nesting within schools because the number of teachers and number of schools is very similar. So it's almost always one teacher per school. The interclass correlation of so the two outcomes are post-test and Algebra 1 EOC. The interclass correlation for the post-test is 0.34, meaning that 34% of the variability in post-test is due to teachers. So it's a lot. It also justifies the use of the multi-level model. The standardized, the treatment effect, the effect size was Hedges G equal to 0.33, meaning that the average difference between treatment and control was 0.33 standard deviations. This was statistically significant. For the post-test is the proximal outcome because they take the post-test right after they practice section. For the distal outcome, which is the high-stakes test taken at the end of the semester, the interclass correlation was 0.58, so 58% of the variability was due to teachers. The effect size for the treatment was 0.17, so 0.17 standard deviations, which was also statistically significant. For the treatment effect heterogeneity, we use Weiger and Erte 2008 method of causal forests to estimate the individual conditional average treatment effects. And this method works by dividing the data set into samples and running two stages where the causal forest is fit on the first subsample and variance in variable importance is estimated. And then in the second stage, we selected only the variables that had higher than median variable importance in the first stage and ran the second stage, another causal forest, and obtained the individual conditional average treatment effects. Okay. In terms of variable importance, we had 17 variables, which were all student level variables. The ones with importance above the median were these variables. I was not surprised that pretestability was the most important variable. Followed rate is the rate that the students followed the video recommendations when offered, because they could ignore the video recommendation, right? So, so followed rate is really a measure of compliance with recommendation. Absent days from school, ethnicity, being in this case Hispanic, this is a binary variable. Percent distance learning is the percentage of the academic year that the student was doing remote instruction. Free reduced lunch. We estimated the individual conditional average treatment effects, which served as the outcome in this multi-level model. And we predicted the iCATES with the variables that were identified in the previous step. And we found here, and this, so we can obtain some statistical inference in terms of the relationship between the individual conditional average treatment effects and the variables that are student characteristics. Okay, and we found that not all of them were statistically significant. Most were. Sex wasn't, and absent days wasn't in the post-test. and these coefficients show that the rate that they followed the recommendations had the strongest effect on their individual conditional average treatment effects. And also, so both pretest and followed rate had positive effects. Okay, now.
Hi, Walter, if you could just wrap up in the next minute or so, because we're
Sure. Okay, so in terms of discussion, we found most interesting there. Well, the pretestability could be the increased effectiveness of the recommendation system for students with high ability could be due to students having stronger self-regulated learning skills, and the higher effect for students with free reduced lunch is very interesting here. We don't know exactly why, but it's promising because this could be that, this system helps somewhat, closing an achievement gap here for economically disadvantaged students. And so we need, more probably qualitative work to understand why these results show that free reduced lunch students benefited more. And similar with Hispanic students, we have hypotheses that these could be associated. Our results show Hispanic students benefited more, have stronger effects. It could be due to cross-cultural differences or differences due to related teacher orchestration. But we need to do follow-up studies to understand this. And in terms of, so, the main limitation here is that this is, we did an exploratory search for variables that were related to heterogeneity of treatment effects, but our results don't explain, why some students benefited more. So it needs to be followed up, probably with qualitative studies. And the other limitation is that we did not include any teacher variables or school level variables. The treatment effect heterogeneity was predicted solely by student level variables. And a methodological limitation is that we used a single machine learning based method for heterogeneity of treatment effects detection. However, there was a recent competition that was described in this paper by Carvalho that included causal forests as well as other methods such as Bayesian additive regression trees that showed that the methods disagreed quite a bit. So it may be that if we ran these with, for example, Bayesian additive regression trees, the results could have been different. So the area of machine learning for HTE detection is new, and we could run multiple to do sort of a sensitivity analysis to see how which student characteristics show an impact in the heterogeneity of treatment effects across multiple methods to detect heterogeneity of treatment effects. Okay, so these are briefly sub-references that are cited. The Carvalho one is the competition. The second one is the previous study or the previous year presented at LAC. And the last one is the paper about the causal forest method that I used here. That's it. You can find these papers at virtuallearninglab.org, with all the details on the methods I built on here.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.